Hotel staff of Reddit. What's the most NSFW moment you witnessed at your hotel? Story 1. I worked front desk at a luxury hotel. One night, the elevator doors opened and a completely naked woman stumbled out covered in blood. It turned out that she was epileptic, had a seizure in the shower, fell, cut herself, exited her room, and locked herself out. It was a truly terrifying 25 minutes of trying to piece together what happened. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. I wasn't working at this hotel and was just a guest, but I wish I had asked the staff for the backstory. So I'm checking into my hotel in Los Angeles and was given my key card. I head to the room, open the door, and there's a naked buff dude standing next to the bed just staring at me. He says nothing. I apologize and quickly leave, assuming I had somehow gotten into the wrong room. I go back to the front desk and say, I'm sorry, but I think you gave me the wrong room. There's a naked man already in there. The worker at the front desk just says, crap, not again. He pulls out his walkie-talkie and says, security, he's back again. They assigned me to a different room and I was on my way. Story 3. Many, many years ago, when I was still a teenager, my half-sister got a job working at a Steak and Shake. The restaurant was new and was in a different state from where we lived at the time. My sister was a teenager herself, but old enough to work. The company had set her up in a local hotel. We had just arrived back to the hotel after my sister picked me up at the bus station and we had a room on the second floor. Just before closing the door, I looked over at the 7-Eleven and saw some police cars and wondered what was going on. Suddenly, this young man appeared at the hotel door out of breath and wanting to come inside. I was startled, as you can imagine. I yelled, "No!" and shut the door in his face. I'm guessing something happened at the store involving this guy. He saw me and my sister going into our room and decided to take a chance of hiding in there. Yeah, nope. Story 4. The last story reminds me of a similar one from many years ago. Me and a girlfriend are on a road trip and decide to stop for the night in this town in the interior of British Columbia. Pull into a motel that has a vacancy sign, check in, and head to the room. We open the door and there's this naked dude fast asleep on the bed. Whoops, we think. Head back to the counter and tell them, somebody already has the one they gave us. No, they say, it wasn't booked. That's the local homeless guy who likes to break into that room every time he can scrape together enough money to get drunk so he can sleep it off. They gave us a different room and off we went. We were pretty young at the time and it didn't really occur to us to say anything then. But if something like that happened now, I'd be like, if you know some dude regularly breaks into that specific room and you had other rooms available, why wouldn't you just give us the other rooms? And then my second question would be, what the frick was wrong with the second room that you felt the drunk guy break-in room was a better first choice? And then after asking those two questions, I'd get the F out of there and go find another place to stay. Story 5. I work overnights in a relatively small hotel, and at least 6 to 7 days a week I hear people banging loud as hell in their rooms. Half the rooms have a balcony that overlooks the lobby, and those doors aren't soundproofed at all. We had a man sleepwalk out of his room to the lobby, buck-ass nude. We had a woman show up in the lobby in her underwear. Her BF choked her out and stole her wallet with the room keys. And before I started here, there was a massive wedding that took place, and later that night, the groom killed his bride and himself in their room. Story 6. I worked at a hotel in a resort town in Europe. One of the maids called me to a room for help because it had been the location of an extremely messy orgy from the touring ice show. The room was covered in bodily secretions. There were used rubbers thrown everywhere and half the furniture was busted. The poor maid was in tears thinking she'd have to clean it. The hotel management called in a professional cleaning company who wore disposable suits, respirators, and eye protection. They got rid of most of the stuff in the room and charged a fortune to the ice show. Story 7. I was a night auditor at Home to Suites several years back. Our usual extended stay clientele were traveling nurses, government contractors, or out-of-town veterans getting something done at the VA hospital. But we had one guy and one girl on the floor for a few weeks that were just odd. It took us a bit to realize it was a hooker and her pimp. Some John would come to see her, and the guy who rented the room would come hang out in the lobby or go smoke at our fire pit. Our manager was a bit clueless and took longer to figure it out than the rest of us, but once she did, she went and knocked on the door to ask them to leave. He only cracked the door a bit so she couldn't see inside the room. He declined housekeeping for 2 weeks straight. But she managed to see an office chair behind him that had 2 handguns and a huge Rambo knife on it, so she called the cops. I came up later that day to pick up my check to find the cops had surrounded the building. Turns out he barricaded himself in the room and held the escort hostage. So SWAT had to come tear gas him through the window and use a battering ram to get inside. The owners fired our manager for that, for letting it go on for so long and the optics of the cops swarming our hotel. Story 8. Had an underage girl naked from the waist down speedwalking around the hotel and casino looking for her mom. She was absolutely hammered and in full blackout. Me and another supervisor caught up to her just as she was getting into an elevator full of drunk dudes telling her that they would help her find her mom. Her mom was not at the casino, and we never determined where she actually came from. She just appeared there, moving like a speedwalker, naked except for a tank top. Story 9. I was a night shift security guard for a motel right next to the biggest casino in my state. It was common for addicts to hang around the property. One time, this guy staying in a room did a little too much and had a freak out. He was running around the walkways naked, and I had to ward him away from people's rooms so they wouldn't be disturbed. He ended up jumping off the second-story balcony and splatting onto the pavement. He scampered up and hauled ass across the street into a car dealership. Not my problem anymore. Story 10. Many years ago, I worked at a very nice casino resort as a valet. A regular pulled up in his nice BMW and went to help. Wrote up his ticket, got his keys, and offered to help load his luggage on a bell cart while we waited for a bellman. Opened the trunk and went to lift the suitcase, and I about threw out my back. I wasn't prepared for it to be so heavy. Gave it another go and heaved it onto the bell cart and heard a sound. Sir, did your suitcase just make an oof sound? Long story short, a hooker who was banned from the property was stowed away in there to get up to his room. Story 11. I'm working night shift as a receptionist and had my fair share of questionable encounters. One night, a guy comes from outside and asks if he could use our restroom. It's located one floor down. And every time we let someone in at night, we kind of scan the person before letting them in. And I didn't get any crazy vibes from this dude. After about maybe 20 to 25 minutes, I got the feeling maybe everything wasn't okay and went downstairs. When approaching the bathroom, I could hear him inside the handicap toilet and the door was open a bit. He was on his knees with his pants down, jerking it and sucking on the door handle while watching adult videos on his phone. I yelled at him and asked him what the hell he's doing, but couldn't get in contact with him, so I grabbed a towel and threw it over his face to break line of sight. I told him to leave immediately or I would call the police. I went upstairs and after a few minutes, he left the building. That one sticks out to me. Story 12. I used to work as a bartender for the Four Seasons in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Here's my story. Late night at around 1:30 a.m., and we're getting ready to close the bar. A very attractive woman, aged about 30, approaches. My buddy and I tell her that we're just about to close up, but can offer her a drink if she wants. She seems drunk already and pauses for a moment before whipping out a $20 bill and handing it to me. She asks for a Negroni. I say sure and begin to make it. As I'm putting the ice into the mixer, I see my buddy give me a funny look, a shocked sort of look. I ask him what's up, and he side-eyes towards the woman. Lo and behold, I turn around and there she is, breasts out, rubbing her nips. I ask her kindly to leave and tell her I can't serve her. She walks away, but not before discarding of her sports bra and calling me a slur. That is my crazy NSFW story. Story 13. I worked at a frighteningly fast sandwich shop in college. We were open late and had to deal with a bunch of drunks and the like. One night we had a huge group of bikers come in, probably like 30 people. All of them older, like 50 plus with leather vests, handlebar mustaches. You get it. One of the women in the group orders her sandwich. I'm working the register, so I tell her it'll be $7 or whatever. So she pulls out her breasts, and I gotta tell you, they weren't great. She was a large woman already, and they weren't exactly pretty. She starts rubbing her nips and says, "How much now?" I look at her breasts and then look back up at her face and say, $10. Then there was this horribly quiet moment where everyone got really tense. Then she starts laughing and all the guys start laughing and they tipped us really well. Put a couple hundred in that jar. It wasn't until later that I learned they were a legit biker gang in the area who were actually pretty dangerous. Drugs and guns apparently. So I'm lucky they thought it was funny. Story 14. Not witnessed, but I saw a portion on camera. A guest was walking the halls with a machete. He proceeds to go into his room. A few minutes later, the guest next door can be seen pounding on his door. The previous night, he had assaulted the woman he was staying there with. I'm assuming they thought he was abusing her again. The neighbor started to head back to their room when the guest throws the woman out of the room with her arm barely attached, spraying blood all over the walls and floor. He doesn't notice the door shut behind him and he takes off running. He was caught very quickly in a parking lot next door. That room was something I'll never forget. Blood and flesh on the bed and floor. Boss said to tell housekeeping to clean it up. I quit a few days later. Story 15. Worked at Hyatt in Toronto. Management sent me up to a room they knew contained a pimp. Big fur coat, grills, giant chains, and of course his employees. They did not warn me this beforehand. If they did, I wouldn't have gone alone. His employees were both topless and apparently celebrating a birthday, and tried very hard to get me to join. I just needed them to not get another noise complaint because I didn't want to have to evict them. Story 16. I did security for a hotel for a number of years. I've seen naked guests locked out of their rooms, wedding parties breaking into pool areas and jumping in fully clothed, Had a drunk woman climb out of her third-floor window and chill on the roof just below. And the worst was when somebody drowned in the lake beside the hotel and they hadn't found the body yet. Doing night rounds sucked because I was afraid I was going to find it. Story 17. So, not hotel staff, but this story fits the bill for what you're asking. I was a pizza delivery boy. Fleabag Motel in our town. We get a call for pizza delivery, blah blah blah. I get the order, I drive it over, and knock on the room door. Guy answers the door wearing only a towel. I glance right past him and there's a beautiful, butt-naked black woman laying on the bed on full display. She notices me looking, I'm sure, and just says, "How you doing, baby?" Not baby in a way like you would call a lover or like she was flirting, but more in like a motherly kind of way. I looked up at the dude after that and he just gave me a look like, "That's right, I just got done hitting that." Story 18. When I was young and worked at a hotel, I was delivering a room service meal, and when I got there, the door was closed but had been left just shy of being latched. I knocked, and the guest yelled, "Come in." I pushed it open with the cart, walked in, and he was standing there with a big grin on his face watching my reaction. As I wheeled in the cart, butt naked with a woman, also naked, on her knees, vigorously blowing him. He never stopped or even did a sideways glance in my direction. He smiled and reached out and handed me a 20 he had in his hand and said to just leave it there and close the door on the way out. I guess part of their thing was to show off and see my reaction. I was shocked, but I never said anything to anyone at work. Story 19. I worked at the front desk of a large convention hotel, one of the big hotel brands. The lobby bar was right across the lobby from the front desk. One night, as I was working the desk checking someone into their room, these two drunk guys in the bar got into a fight. They were really going at it, like beating the crap out of each other, and they spilled out into the lobby. Then one guy picks up a bar stool and, just like in the movies, he crashed it over the other guy's head. But unlike the movies, the bar stool didn't splinter into pieces. It was solid wood and he bashed the other guy hard. Other guy went down like a sack of potatoes, out cold and bleeding all over the place from a large head wound. I got to sit and watch as the cops and paramedics came, arrested them both, and patched up the one guy's busted head. Meanwhile, I still had guests checking in, wondering what kind of hotel they just booked. Story 20. I work in the back of the house at a major Las Vegas resort. When we first opened, management made every effort to conceal anything negative that might have occurred from the guests staying at the resort. One day on the receiving dock, an ambulance crew comes through pushing an empty gurney. About 30 minutes later, they come back with a boy completely under a sheet. Someone had died. The NSFW moment of this was the obvious man's corpse had a protruding hard-on tenting the sheet. It was rumored that he died of combined coke overdose while taking Viagra, and he died during the act. Story 21. I used to work third shift at a hotel while going to university. One weekend every summer, our city hosted a tournament for the National Softball Association for the Deaf. One night, I got multiple noise complaints and went upstairs. In one of the rooms, a man and woman were having the loudest, most bestial banging session you could possibly imagine. You could hear it from 30 meters down the hall. They weren't answering the phone and obviously couldn't hear me knocking. I used a master key to crack open the door and was even more amazed at the pure volume and completely atonal and unabashed moans, grunts, and yowls. Being careful not to stick my head in, I reached inside the room and flipped the lights on and off, then pretty much ran away. It's a shame people complained because I hated to interrupt what must have been a good time. Story 22. I had a woman tell me she was only into white guys and it's too bad that I'm not. I'm a pretty dark-skinned Mexican. I didn't really acknowledge her. Her husband said he needs to go talk to the front desk. 10 seconds later, she pulls up her dress and tells me to bang her on the bar. She says it's a fantasy to bang hotel or service workers. I ask her to please go away as 1. I'm not staff. I just sat at the bar. And 2. My wife is next to me, laughing at her airing her kitty in the hotel bar. The bartender is horrified and the actual staff are apologizing. I ask them for what? Because my wife is hysterically laughing and I'm not afraid of free-range women. Now, my wife is dying laughing and we just showed up here for our honeymoon 30 minutes ago. Overall, a good start to a great week. Story 23. Worked on a show in Las Vegas Casino. During the AVN's Adult Movie Awards show, a top actress came to our show with her boyfriend. Show was held because she started lifting her shirt to show the audience her breasts. Then, she went down on the boyfriend. As security finally arrived, they were having full-on banging while sitting in the audience. He went to get drinks, ditching her. She bit a security guard in the arm so hard that she hit bone. Eventually, she was carried out and arrested, and I'm sure the boyfriend was as well. Their awards show was the next day, but she missed it due to being in jail. This, by the way, was a Cirque du Soleil show. Definitely not the place for this behavior. Story 24. I used to work at a hotel. Thankfully, I never witnessed anything in person, but I was certainly privy to a lot more info than I cared to know about. One day, a young man came in asking for a room. Sure, we have availability, and I went over rooms and pricing. He said, "Let me ask my chick." I didn't pay too much attention to his wording. A few minutes later, he came back and got registered. I thanked him and said I hoped him and his girlfriend had a nice stay and to let me know if there's anything I can do for them. "Nah, man, she's not my girlfriend," he replied. I apologized. Again, I didn't pay too much attention to his wording earlier, so I simply said I was sorry I misunderstood. He replied, "Just 'cause I nut in her doesn't make her my girlfriend, but my balls are full." I simply replied, "Sir, I hope you have a pleasant stay." I really didn't need to know all that, and he certainly didn't need to tell me all that. I didn't really know how else to reply, but I'm probably safe in assuming that he and, well, not his girlfriend, certainly did have a good night. Although, again, I really didn't need to know about it. Story 25. Worked in a luxury hotel. Had a particular convention in town with guests who expected a lot of freebies because of who they were. Christian Men's Ministry Group. The leader was a smug prick who convinced our rooms manager to give them the largest conference rooms for free so that their wives could spend the day doing Bible study. That afternoon, we had a father and his son tell us they could hear a muffled scream coming from the room next to theirs, so we went to do a wellness check. Lo and behold, the religious ministries guy had called for a prostitute who brought her boyfriend. They tied him up in a sling hanging from the bedroom doorframe, gagged him, robbed him, and stuck a double-ended adult toy in his butt. That's how we found him. Took multiple maintenance crews to be able to cut him down. He then tried to get us to comp more of their rooms because of our security failures, leading to his assault, battery, and robbery. One of our staff let slip to his wife, their bookkeeper, what actually happened, and his complaints magically went away. Story 26. I used to stay in one Marriott for work all the time over 5 years. Booked Sunday to Saturday for 20 months straight at one point. Was cool with all the staff and manager. They would even hold my favorite room for me unless they absolutely needed every room with 2 beds. It wasn't uncommon for wedding parties, sports teams, etc. to come in. But one time, a church group came and booked like a quarter of the rooms. I arrived at around 11 Sunday night, and the lobby was a zoo. People were blocking the breezeway, several groups having loud conversations in the lobby, and their D-bag leader complaining to the manager about respect or some other BS. I go to my room, got settled in, and went to bed. Then frickin' kids decided it was playtime and started running up and down the halls and stomping on the stairs, and the parents didn't do crap. I didn't get to sleep until well after midnight and had to be up before 6. Needless to say, I wasn't happy. I figured the church group leader might complain to corporate, so I decided to call myself. I let them know that the staff showed extraordinary constraint and civility to an obviously horrid group of guests, and I suggested my minion do the same. We were both ambassador-level members of the rewards program, so what we say actually seemed to carry some weight. Got a call from the manager later that day thanking us for going to bat for them and that the group of guests were banned from future bookings. Story 27. I worked housekeeping in a shady hotel in my local area. I say shady because it's a nicer hotel but in a bad part of town, and it attracts a lot of crazies. There was a man that used to tip the housekeepers in weed to clean his room. A large amount of weed to the housekeepers in an illegal state, and always wondered why. I finally got my turn to clean his room and figured it out. There were adult toys everywhere. Like, everywhere. They were suction cupped to the headboards, shower, and toilet seat. There was loose glitter all over every inch of the room, as well as the balcony and fireplace. Used rubbers were lined up like they were being counted before being thrown out onto the table and the seat at the end of the bed. He was always in the room while you cleaned, profusely apologized, asked you not to say anything about it, and would just hand you an ounce to throw out the trash, vacuum, and replace the towels and sheets. It was good weed, so honestly, I get why the other housekeepers never ratted him out.